we have Greg Pinn from Merlon.ai, and it's a great topic to talk about because we've talked a lot about the ways the data is used and the regulatory overlay, but this is about understanding, identifying risk using unstructured data, which is certainly, I wouldn't call it a new frontier, but it's certainly burgeoning and will only become more and more important. So Greg Pinn, he is the Senior Director of Strategy at Merlon.ai, which is one of our sponsors. Thank you very much. He spent 13 years building, the last 13 plus years, building industry leading. When I read that, since I'm so old, it's like, oh, okay. Building industry leading software and data products for AML and know your customer to reduce reputational regulatory risk and ensure compliance. He's currently working on a global team of AI and NLP experts to develop the next generation of AML investigation tools. So why don't I turn it over to Greg?
Thank you so much, David. Great to connect again, and thank you everyone for joining this morning, on a beautiful Saturday morning, at least here in Dallas, where I am. You know, one of the things that's become a big topic in understanding the impact of COVID-19 and understanding the impact of how COVID is greatly, impacting both really negatively these global teams, is understanding from a compliance perspective, what does that mean for properly aligning and properly doing the very painful work of understanding not just the sanctions and PEP risk exposure, but understanding the larger risk exposure of individuals and institutions that banks connect with. The reality that exists today is this was becoming an almost unsolvable challenge before COVID, and now with a workforce that's distributed, we have, as an industry, we have to find better solutions for understanding the risk of an individual that doesn't exist in any list, on any government watch list, on a sanctions or PEP list. And that's where Merlon has actually been very clearly focused for the last 3 years. And I want to talk just sort of more generally about unstructured adverse media, and then a little bit about how Merlon solves the problem. The way that this has worked for so many years, 20 plus years, is that financial institutions look to large databases of news to search for and uncover risk associated with whether it be clients or other third parties, to understand what is the risk associated with them. The challenge has always, the challenge 20 years ago was not enough data. 20 years ago, you had the issue that very few data providers had access to enough data, and there wasn't enough data that existed readily available online to be able to get proper access to the data. That problem has been completely solved. There is no longer the challenge of having enough data. The challenge that exists today is too much data, and how do you make sense of that data? If you combine that with the fact that humans are just innately very bad at focusing on repetitive, tedious tasks in the best of times, and this being COVID, which is, one of the worst of times, with employees having to balance not just their workload, but family obligations, children working from home, spouses working from home, and high stress situations, the existing way that financial institutions access unstructured data, reading article after article after article, is simply not maintainable. And so Merlon has been focused for a long time on how do you change that space completely. How do you look at not take a step forward, but take a leap forward in understanding how do you have analysts focus their effort on the real material area of risk and ignore all of the noise. I think if you ask any analyst that does this sort of unstructured adverse media work, you'll find that they spend such a considerable part of their time reading irrelevant articles. And that's what Merlon is here to change, really to change that focus and that direction. A little bit on sort of the landscape as it exists today. We really divide the landscape of adverse media solutions into 3 big buckets. At the lower end are general purpose tools. This can be Google News, Bing News, logging into random internet sites that may exist around the world to do sort of general purpose screening. And what shocked me, and I've been able to confirm this both anecdotally and statistically, is about 85% of financial institutions use Google News as part of their screening process. I'm guessing some of our attendees today probably do this as well. And the problem with that is that Google News is like casting a very, very wide net. And that very wide net returns a whole lot of things that just are not necessary. As an example, if you search for any Western name, any North American or Western European name in Google News, you are likely to get page after page after page of obituaries. Unfortunately, because they're obituaries, you do need to review them and make sure that there's no fraud, probate, insurance issues, inheritance issues that may present other risks. But the reality is that almost all obituaries don't present any risk. They're just very common local newspaper listings. And so while a lot of financial institutions have looked to use these free services with the idea that free will save them money, what we found is that this ends up costing institutions tens of thousands of dollars in lost efficiency per analyst per year because of the wide net that Google News provides. The next step up from this are sort of the big players within the space. RDC, LexisNexis, Refinitiv, which used to be Thomson Reuters, and Dow Jones Factiva. All these solutions are very data focused. How do you sell the most data and provide that data with very rudimentary keyword-based solutions around those? And basically what that does in the background is it'll search for a name, Alex Smith, and then it'll search Alex Smith money laundering, Alex Smith organized crime, Alex Smith war crimes, Alex Smith financial fraud, and just go on and on and on. These solutions were very, very competitive earlier on when we were in the war for data, for who could get the most data as quickly as possible. We have, luckily, I think for everybody, that war has been, we've sort of hit the point where that war is no longer necessary. All of the providers have pretty comparable data sets, and all of them have pretty rudimentary solutions around those. And so where Merlon has come in is that this is not a data issue. This is not an area where institutions should be worried about getting enough data. The data is there. But rather, how do you access the data in a way that uncovers real material risk? How do you access data in a way that reduces the amount of tedium and repetitive tasks that analysts have to do today, reading article after article after article that don't present risk to an institution? And so the big challenge has always been is how do you bridge the gap between structured data, things like Dow Jones Risk and Compliance, World Compliance, World Check, and unstructured data. And the history of this has always been that you needed to rely on structured data because that was the only way to get access to the personal information from articles to be able to make sense of that. Merlon is bridging that gap between structured and unstructured data, making it easier for institutions to get access to it. The other thing that we've done, and I'll jump through very quickly, is unlike these existing solutions, Merlon's able to understand context. So being able to look past, irrelevant obituaries, sports scores, fictional accounts, historical accounts, and really look for articles that have material risk. We're also able to uncover who is the perpetrator of the risk. Is it because that's really at the end of the day what you as an individual in your financial institution, that's what you're looking for. And so by bringing the power of AI to solve this challenge, we're able to really reduce the amount of human tedious effort. And I want to sort of just pause on that for a moment. This would be the product is quite powerful and quite needed in the industry in the best of times. In the days of COVID, it's just not possible for financial institutions to rely on home-based employees to do very tedious tasks. I'm sure we're all living in a world of distractions during this session this morning. I'm guessing many of us have children running around and pets that need attention and spouses and roommates and everything else. And so those distractions make it very difficult for an analyst to have to read dozens or hundreds of articles per day. And so by focusing their effort on real risk, we've really saved them from this struggle. So I'd like to just jump in very quickly and give you a view of what Merlon is in a very material way. So unlike existing solutions in the market that are focused on articles, Merlon takes the level of abstraction one level up. Rather than being focused on individual articles, we're focused on the integration of those articles with the evidence to create findings. And I'm going to use an example here of an individual named Zachary Clark. One of the things that you'll see about the tool, it's very, very simple. And the reason for that simplicity is that Merlon has taken all of the heavy lifting off and on in the background. So if we open up Zachary Clark, what the first thing that you're going to see is Merlon was able to uncover 271 articles for Zachary Clark. We've combined those into 20 findings, which means we've reduced the effort for the analyst by about 93%. And how we're able to do it is the secret sauce of Merlon. And I'll show you some of that in a moment. But the reality here is that we've taken an action that would have taken an analyst somewhere between 3 and 8 hours and can now be done in around 10 minutes. And that is a huge, huge difference, while at the same time uncovering greater risk because we're focusing the analyst's effort. So let's use our first result here as an example. Here we have a Brooklyn man attempting to be arrested for providing material support to ISIS and 9 related articles. So the first thing that you're going to see is Merlon does not do this at an article by article level. Rather, Merlon is looking for this. Merlon is looking at this holistically. What is all the risk associated with this case, this event? We've uncovered 10 different articles, all by different publications, and none of which are duplicates. These are rather different articles that speak to the same area of risk. So from those articles, we've extracted the name, we've extracted a date of birth, we know the type of offenses, and we've also extracted key areas of risk so that we understand what is beyond just the headline, what is going on with this individual. We know that in November of 2019, we know he was arrested in Brooklyn. We know he was charged with providing material support to ISIS, but none of this information, like any good AML solution, this information is not based on what's right in front of the individual. It's not based on just what we say, but rather we take the analyst back down into the evidence. In this case, we've got the article from the Federal Information and News Dispatch. We have the date of the article, and then we've got, if you look as I cycle through these pieces of evidence, it takes me directly to that part of the article. And this is so helpful in uncovering real risk, in uncovering the situations where you want to understand, or your analysts want to understand, that context. Because we're able to extract all of this PII, we're also able to filter the PII as well. And so one of the things I can do here is I can say, the only partial match I care about is Zachary Scott Clark. I know that that's his middle name. I'm also going to filter out our fuzzy matches. I've now reduced my effort by about half in basically 2 button clicks. I can now look at our next case. In this case, we've got a theft and embezzlement case. We've got Zachary Scott Clark. We have a date of birth. We know the predicate offenses. And again, we can be taken directly to the part of the article. In this case, we've got the Ogden, Utah Standard Examiner. But we can be taken directly to the part of the article that's connected to this individual. And in cases where articles go for page after page after page, this can be a very, very critical piece of truly understanding that risk, understanding the details associated with Zachary Clark. I do want to spend just a moment, and then we'll turn this over for questions, to really go through how is Merlon able to uncover all of the, how are we able to suppress all of these other results? And the way that we do this is through our AI engine and our natural language processing. What we're able to do is uncover context in articles, not looking for specific terms, but understanding those terms, understanding where is an individual a perpetrator versus a victim, where is there real risk versus just a keyword that may allude to risk. As an example here, we've got this is a court record for Blount County. We can tell in this that we've got two cases here that we've highlighted. One is a domestic assault false imprisonment case, which involves Wendell Glenn Wilson. And then right below it, we have our Zachary Clark. And that's a divorce proceeding. And so what Merlon's been able to do is we've been able to say there is no risk associated with Zachary Clark, or Zachary Allen Clark, I should say, because we're able to understand the context between one part of the article and another. So this is a very, very brief view as to where Merlon exists today, where we sit in the market. And the hope is really to look at, for those institutions that are obviously struggling with understanding how to work in COVID land, where employees are now distributed where they never had been before, where you've got teams that are trying to focus on ultimate beneficial ownership, trying to focus on other areas of risk and growing sanctions and new policies, whether it's involving the travel rule with crypto or other FinCEN policies. You want to be able to free up your analysts that are doing adverse media, reduce the amount of effort that they're focused on, and really help them to focus on real risk and mitigating real risk, and leaving those tasks that are not human focused to AI in as much as possible. So David, I'm gonna pause there and see if there are any questions out in the Zoomosphere, and sort of end it there.
Well, I certainly have a question. I'm curious about how one would integrate this, how a firm like the target firms you've got and how they integrate this into their workflow. Does this simply become another screen that people go to when they're doing their analysis, or just give me an example of how it might integrate?
So there's a few ways that we can do this, and a lot of this depends on the type of organization that exists. For some organizations, we have what I showed today, which are our SaaS offering. The advantage of that offering is that anyone can try it immediately from our website. If anyone on the call today goes to Merlon.ai, you click Start Free Trial, you will go and experience exactly what I showed you today. But for those institutions that need an integrated approach, our API is designed to remove a lot of the effort associated with financial institutions having to go and connect one system to another. The remediation has to be done in Merlon, and that's simply because obviously there's a lot of pieces to our tech that make the most sense to be in our integrated solution. But we can make those calls happen externally, and then all that the analyst needs to do is go to Merlon, go to that screen when there's an alert to review.
Excellent. Sounds very, very good. Sounds very easy to implement. If there are no other questions, and I don't see anything else in the chat, I will thank you and say take a minute or two. We're going to be back in 5 minutes to get started talking about a fundamental thing that's important to all of this is your governance, because you can do all the things that you want to do with data, but if the governance isn't in place, it can cause problems for you. So we'll have a conversation about that commences in 5 minutes at 25 past the hour, and I look forward to reconnecting with you then.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.